The organ music filled St. Augustine's Church as I smoothed my navy dress and tried to ignore the knot in my stomach. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, painting rainbow patterns across the wooden pews. Today was my niece's baptism, and I'd arrived early to claim a seat near the front. My sister Emily had asked me to be here, and despite everything, I wanted to support her. The church filled quickly with family and friends, their whispered conversations blending with the soft music. My mother, Victoria, swept in wearing cream and pearls, greeting everyone with her practiced smile. She didn't acknowledge me. When Emily arrived with baby Sophia wrapped in the family christening gown, my heart swelled. The ceremony began beautifully. Father Thomas spoke about faith and family, about the sacred responsibility of guiding a child's spiritual journey. Then came the moment I'd been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. "Will the godparent please step forward?" Father Thomas asked, his voice echoing through the church. I started to rise from my seat, my legs shaking slightly. But before I could stand fully, my mother's voice cut through the sacred silence like a knife. "Oh, not Claire. She's too much of a disappointment for something that sacred." The words landed like physical blows. Nervous laughter rippled through the congregation. Heat flooded my face as dozens of pairs of eyes turned toward me. Some people looked away quickly, embarrassed. Others stared openly, waiting for my reaction. The room began to spin. I gripped the back of the pew in front of me, my knuckles turning white. Emily stood frozen at the altar, baby Sophia starting to fuss in her arms. My brother-in-law, Patrick, shifted uncomfortably beside her. Father Thomas looked genuinely confused, his kind eyes moving between my mother and me. I forced myself to smile through the tears that threatened to spill. This wasn't the first time my mother had humiliated me publicly, but doing it in church, at my niece's baptism, felt especially cruel. Then Father Thomas did something unexpected. He looked down at the papers in his hands, his brow furrowing deeply. Father Thomas studied the documents for a long moment, then looked up at me with gentle confusion. "I apologize for the confusion," he said carefully, "but according to the registration form submitted 2 weeks ago, Claire Bennett is listed as the official godmother." My heart stopped. The murmuring in the church grew louder. My mother's face flushed an angry red. "That must be a mistake," Victoria said firmly. "I'll sponsor the child myself if necessary." Father Thomas shook his head slowly. "Mrs. Hamilton, the mother of the child must designate the godparent. This form bears Emily's signature." Every eye turned to Emily, who looked like she wanted to disappear. The ceremony continued in awkward silence, Father Thomas glossing over the godparent portion. When it ended, I considered slipping out, but Father Thomas gestured for me to wait. As the congregation filed out, I hung back in the now empty church. Father Thomas approached with the baptism documents. "Your sister specifically requested you as godmother 3 weeks ago," he said kindly. My hands trembled as I looked at the form. There was Emily's handwriting, my name written in her careful script. Below it, a blank line waited for my signature. "Why didn't she say anything just now?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Father Thomas sighed. "I've been a priest for 30 years. I recognize fear when I see it. Fear of our mother. If you don't sign this," Father Thomas continued gently, "I'll have to void the registration entirely. The baptism would still be valid, but there would be no official godparent on record." Through the open doors, I could see my mother standing on the church steps, holding court with relatives. Her laugh carried on the breeze, light and carefree, as if nothing had happened. I thought about all the times I'd backed down, all the times I'd let my mother's words push me into silence. I thought about my failed cafe 3 years ago, the business I'd poured everything into. My mother never let me forget it. Every gathering, she reminded everyone I'd failed. But standing in that church, looking at my sister's handwriting, something shifted inside me. Emily had wanted me. Despite our mother's influence, my sister had chosen me for this sacred role. "Do you have a pen?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Father Thomas smiled and handed me one. I walked to the altar and signed my name. The pen scratched against the paper, the sound loud in the empty church. My signature looked small but definite. Real. Father Thomas witnessed it and added his own signature. There, he said warmly. Official. Congratulations, godmother. As I turned to leave, Father Thomas touched my arm. Claire, wait. Your mother tried to have this form removed from our files last week. She came to the rectory and told my secretary there'd been a mistake. My stomach dropped. Mrs. Chen has been with this parish for 40 years. She doesn't remove official documents without my authorization, Father Thomas continued. Your mother even offered a generous donation to make the problem disappear. The reception at my mother's Victorian house was already in full swing when I arrived. Laughter and conversation spilled from the open windows. I considered not going in, but leaving felt too much like surrender. I'd signed that paper. I was Sophia's godmother now, officially. Inside, I found Emily in the nursery upstairs, changing Sophia's diaper. She looked up when I entered, guilt written across her face. Claire, I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell you I'd registered you, but Mom found out and she lost her mind. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She said if I went through with it, she'd stop helping with the mortgage. Patrick's company downsized last month. We're barely managing the house payments. The pieces clicked into place. My sister wasn't just emotionally dependent on our mother, she was financially trapped. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you in the church, Emily whispered. I just froze. I hugged her carefully. It's okay. I understand. It's not okay, Emily said. Claire, there's something else you need to know. It's about Dad's will. Emily went to her dresser and pulled out a folder from the bottom drawer, hidden beneath sweaters. Mom told us Dad didn't leave anything specific in his will. That everything went to her. I remembered. Our father had died 5 years ago from a heart attack. In my grief, I hadn't questioned the details. My mother had handled everything. But that's not true, Emily continued, opening the folder. Inside were photocopied pages, handwritten notes, bank statements. I found these in Mom's office last month. Dad left you something specific, Claire. He left you his bookstore. My heart stopped. What bookstore? Exactly, Emily said bitterly. The one Mom told us closed years ago because it wasn't profitable. She said Dad had sold it before he died. I sank onto Emily's bed, still holding Sophia. Why would she lie? Because the store never closed. It's still operating on Maple Street. Mom's been running it herself, or rather, having her friend Diane manage it. The room tilted. My father's bookstore, chapter and verse, had been his pride and joy. I thought it was gone, I whispered. We all did. That's what she wanted us to think. Emily pointed to one of the documents. This is a copy of Dad's will. He left you 50% ownership. The store was supposed to help you restart after your cafe failed. Mom has the original, locked away. I studied the photocopy. There was my name, in my father's will, connected to the bookstore I'd mourned as lost. A knock on the door made us both jump. Emily quickly shoved the folder under a baby blanket. Come in, she called. Our mother entered, her smile not reaching her eyes. There you are, Claire. I thought perhaps you'd decided to leave early. I signed the godparent form, I said, meeting her gaze. Father Thomas had me do it after the ceremony. Victoria's expression hardened for just a moment. How nice. I'm sure Emily appreciates your participation. She turned to Emily. Darling, your Aunt Helen is asking for you. She wants to see the baby. Now, Emily. It was clearly a dismissal. Emily gave me an apologetic look and left with Sophia. My mother and I stood alone in the nursery. You're making things difficult, Victoria said quietly. As usual. I didn't make anything difficult, I replied. Emily chose me as godmother. I simply accepted. Emily is confused about many things right now. New mothers often are. Victoria moved to the window. You've always had a talent for inserting yourself where you're not wanted. The casual cruelty took my breath away. I'm her sister. Sophia's aunt. Of course I'm wanted. Are you? After your business failed, after you proved yourself incapable of managing even a simple cafe, you think you're qualified to guide a child's moral development? You're barely managing your own life. I thought of the folder hidden under the baby blanket. The bookstore my father had left me. The lies my mother had built. I should get back to the party, I said. But at the door, I stopped. Why do you hate me so much? Victoria's expression didn't change. I don't hate you, Claire. I'm just disappointed. I left shortly after, claiming a headache. As I drove through town, I found myself passing through the historic district. I turned onto Maple Street, my heart pounding. And there it was. Chapter and verse. The same hand-painted sign, the same green awning, the same window displays. I parked and got out, pressing my face against the glass. Inside, I could see bookshelves, the reading nook with its window seat, the cafe counter. It was real. It existed. My father's store hadn't died with him. My mother had lied. For 5 years, she'd let me believe this piece of my father was gone, while she'd been profiting from it. I took photos with my phone, documenting everything. Tomorrow, I decided, I would visit. Monday morning, I called in sick to my insurance job and drove back to Maple Street. I waited until the store opened at 10, watching a woman in her 60s unlock the door. That must be Diane. I crossed the street and went inside. The bell chimed. The smell hit me immediately, old paper, coffee, and that indefinable bookstore scent. It was like stepping back in time. Welcome to Chapter and Verse, Diane called from behind the counter. Let me know if you need help. I walked through the store, running my fingers along familiar shelves. Everything was so achingly familiar. This is a beautiful store, I said, approaching the counter. Has it been here long? Diane smiled warmly. Oh, over 30 years. The original owner passed away 5 years ago, but his wife has kept it running. I manage the day-to-day operations. His wife. Of course, that's what my mother would have told people. Did you know the original owner? I asked carefully. Henry Bennett? Oh yes, wonderful man. He loved this place. His daughter used to help out when she was young. His daughter? Claire, I think her name was. Henry talked about her all the time. He was so proud. She paused, her expression growing sad. It's a shame she and Victoria became estranged after Henry died. Victoria said Claire wanted nothing to do with the family business. That she'd moved away and never looked back. The lies kept layering. I'm Claire Bennett, I said quietly. Diane's face went white. But Victoria said. I've been here in town the whole time. I've been working at Palmer Insurance for 3 years. Before that, I ran a cafe until it closed during the pandemic. I showed her my driver's license. I never moved away. I never knew this store still existed. My mother told me it had been sold before my father died. Diane sank onto the stool. Oh my God. I don't understand why she would. I was hoping you could help me understand that, I said. Did my father leave any papers here? Anything about ownership? Diane's hands were shaking. I manage the store for Victoria. She pays me a salary, handles all the accounts. I never questioned it because she said she was Henry's widow, that everything was legally hers. It's not, I said. According to his will, I own 50% of this store. Diane called her daughter Marie, a paralegal. Within an hour we were in the back office, going through filing cabinets. My father had kept meticulous records. Marie pulled out a folder marked estate documents and spread the contents across the desk. There it was, my father's will, the original. I read through it with shaking hands. Everything Emily had told me was true. My father had left me 50% ownership of chapter and verse, with clear instructions that the store should provide me with income and purpose after my cafe closed. He'd written a letter attached to the will. "Dearest Claire," it began. "By the time you read this, I'll be gone, but I wanted to leave you something meaningful. This store has been my joy, and I know it can be yours too. You have your mother's business sense and my love of books, a powerful combination. Build something beautiful here." I wiped tears from my face as I finished reading. "Your mother has been depositing all profits into accounts only she controls," Marie said, reviewing the financial records. "The store generates about $80,000 in profit annually. For 5 years, that's $400,000 you should have received half of. $200,000. Money that could have saved my cafe. Money that could have given me security, a fresh start. All kept from me while my mother told everyone I was a failure. Is this legal?" I asked. "What she's done?" Marie's expression was grim. "Absolutely not. This is a state fraud, possibly embezzlement. You have grounds for a major lawsuit." Diane looked horrified. "I had no idea. I swear, if I'd known." "I believe you," I said. "What do I do now?" Marie gave me the name of an estate attorney. By Wednesday, I was sitting in Patricia Walsh's office, laying everything out. She reviewed all the documents. "This is one of the clearer cases I've seen," Patricia said. "Your mother has been systematically stealing from you while preventing you from knowing you had any ownership. Can we keep this quiet at first?" I asked. "I don't want to tip her off before we have everything in place." Patricia nodded. "We'll file the necessary paperwork this week. The court will issue orders freezing the bookstore's accounts. She'll be served within days." Thursday evening, Emily called me, her voice panicked. "Claire, Mom is having the bookstore appraised. She's planning to sell it." My stomach dropped. "When?" "She told me yesterday. She said the location is too valuable to waste on a dying business model. Some developer wants to buy the whole block for condos." This was why she'd lied, I realized. She'd been planning this all along, to sell the store, pocket the full amount, and I would never know I'd been entitled to half. "I have something to tell you," I said, and explained everything, the will, the lawyer, the court orders that would arrive tomorrow. Emily was quiet for a long moment. "I should have told you sooner. About the documents I found. You were protecting your family." "I understand. You're my family too," she said, crying. "I'm so sorry, Claire. For everything. For the baptism, for not standing up to her, for taking so long to show you the truth. You showed me eventually. That took courage." Friday morning, Patricia called. The papers were served. "Your mother is at the bookstore now." I drove to Maple Street. My mother's Mercedes was parked across 2 spaces. Through the bookstore windows, I could see her gesturing angrily while Diane stood behind the counter, looking frightened. I took a deep breath and went inside. The bell chimed. My mother spun toward the door, legal papers clutched in her hand. When she saw me, her expression twisted into something ugly. "You," she hissed. "This is your doing." "This is Dad's doing," I corrected. "He left me half this store." "You hid that from me." "You have no right, I have every right." "The court agrees." I moved farther into the store, this place that was mine. "Why did you do it, Mom?" Victoria's face was red with fury. "You want to know why?" "Because you didn't deserve it. You failed at your own business. You proved you couldn't handle responsibility. So you stole from me?" "I protected an asset from being wasted. Everything I've done has been to preserve what your father built. You would have run this place into the ground just like your cafe." The words should have hurt. A week ago, they would have devastated me. But standing in my father's bookstore, holding legal documents that proved my ownership, I felt something different. Clarity. "You're wrong," I said simply. "I'm good at this." Dad knew it. That's why he left me this store. "The court will side with me," Victoria said. "I've been running this business for 5 years. I've maintained it, improved it, kept it profitable." Using my inheritance, I reminded her. While telling everyone I was a disappointment. While humiliating me at my niece's baptism. While trying to erase me from my own family. My mother had no response. Her phone rang. She glanced at it, then at me. "This isn't over." She stormed out. Diane emerged from behind the counter, shaking. "I'm so sorry you had to deal with that." "It's not your fault," I said. "None of this is." The court hearing took 3 weeks. Victoria fought every step. She hired expensive lawyers who argued she'd improved the business and deserved compensation for her management. But the numbers didn't lie. She'd taken $200,000 that should have been mine. Patricia presented the evidence methodically, the will, the hidden documents, the diverted profits. The judge listened with increasing disapproval. When he finally ruled, it was decisive. I was granted full ownership of chapter and verse. Victoria was ordered to repay the stolen profits with interest. She was also required to cover my legal fees. Outside the courthouse, Emily hugged me tight. She'd attended every hearing. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "Dad would be too." A month later, I stood in chapter and verse with Father Thomas. He'd called saying he had something to give me. The bookstore was thriving under my management. I'd rehired employees my mother had let go, expanded the cafe, and started a weekly story hour for children. "I wanted to show you something," Father Thomas said, pulling out old parish records. He pointed to an entry from 23 years ago. "Your father donated the church bell in your name when you were 12. There was a dedication plaque." I stared at the record. "Where's the plaque now?" I asked. "That's what troubled me," Father Thomas said. "When this situation with your mother came to light, I had Mrs. Chen search the storage areas." He pulled out a tarnished brass plaque. I read the inscription, "This bell donated in loving honor of Claire Bennett, whose joy in reading brings light to our community. From her father, Henry Bennett, Easter 1998. My vision blurred with tears. My mother removed this? Father Thomas nodded grimly. According to Mrs. Chen, Victoria had it taken down about 6 years ago. She told the maintenance staff it was being replaced, but it ended up in storage instead. Another erasure. Another way my mother had tried to write me out of my own history. "I'd like to have it reinstalled," Father Thomas said. "With your permission." "The parish council has already approved it." "Yes," I whispered. "Please." He patted my hand. "There's something else. About the baptism." He pulled out the official baptism certificate for Sophia. "I've made an amendment to the record. You are, and always were, the designated godmother." The plaque rededication was held on a Sunday in late fall. The church was full, not just with regular members, but with people from the community who'd heard about what happened. Local news had covered the court case. I stood beside Father Thomas as he addressed the congregation. He spoke about legacy, about honoring those who came before us, and about truth. Then he unveiled the restored plaque, newly polished and mounted beside the church entrance. Dedicated to Claire Bennett, for her father's love of words and faith, he read aloud. The church erupted in applause. Emily was there with Patrick and Sophia. Diane and her family. My former cafe employees. Even some of my mother's former friends, who'd quietly distanced themselves from Victoria as the truth came out. My mother was not there. She'd been invited, but she'd refused to attend. "Just as well," Emily whispered. "This day is about you and Dad, not her." After the ceremony, Father Thomas made one final announcement. "I have one more piece of business," he said, asking me to come forward. My heart raced as I approached the altar. Father Thomas held up the baptism certificate. Due to the confusion at Sophia's baptism, we never properly acknowledged her godmother. I'd like to correct that now. He turned to me. Claire Bennett, do you accept the responsibility of being godmother to Sophia Grace, guiding her in faith and standing beside her throughout her life? My voice was steady and clear. I do. Then by the authority granted to me, I officially recognize you as Sophia's godmother, as designated by her mother and blessed by this church. He handed me the certificate, already signed and sealed. As I took it, I saw my mother standing at the back of the church. She must have arrived late, perhaps unable to stay away. Our eyes met across the distance. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable. Then, without a word, she turned and walked out. Emily started after her, but I called her back. Let her go. Are you sure? I looked at the certificate in my hands, at the community surrounding me, at my father's plaque gleaming on the wall. I'm sure. That evening, the bookstore hosted a celebration. We'd closed early and filled the space with everyone who'd supported me. Children ran between the bookshelves. Adults browsed with wine glasses. Diane had arranged for a cake decorated with tiny fondant books. Father Thomas arrived with Mrs. Chen, who immediately began reorganizing the mystery section. Emily handed Sophia to me, and I held my goddaughter close. You know what Dad used to say? Emily asked quietly. About disappointments? I shook my head. He said disappointments are just expectations that need adjusting. That the only real failure is giving up on yourself. She touched my arm. You never gave up, Claire. Even when Mom tried to make you. Later, after everyone left, I sat alone in the bookstore. I walked to the window seat where I'd spent so many childhood afternoons and hung my father's letter beside the register where I'd see it every day. A letter arrived the following week. I recognized my mother's handwriting. Inside was a single page. You've turned my own family against me, it began. The letter went on, listing her grievances, painting herself as the victim. But near the end, one line stood out, you got that strength from your father. I never understood it. I still don't. I read that line several times. It wasn't an apology. Victoria wasn't capable of that. But it was an admission. An acknowledgement that I possessed something she didn't. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I focused on building the life my father had envisioned for me. Chapter and verse became exactly what he'd wanted, a community hub where people gathered not just to buy books but to connect. I hired 2 part-time employees, both college students. I partnered with local schools for reading programs. I hosted author events and book clubs. The cafe expanded, and soon people were coming specifically for our coffee and comfortable chairs. 6 months after the court case, I was actually making a living from the bookstore. Not wealthy, but stable. Comfortable. More importantly, I was happy. On Sophia's first birthday, Emily threw a party. My mother wasn't there. She'd moved to Florida, Emily told me, to live near her sister. Has she called you? I asked Emily. She shook her head. Not since she left. You? Once. To tell me she was moving. The conversation lasted about 3 minutes. We watched Sophia destroy her birthday cake, smearing frosting across her face with delighted giggles. Do you think we'll ever repair things with Mom? Emily asked. It was a question I'd considered often. I don't know. Maybe. But it would require her to acknowledge what she did, to actually apologize. I'm not holding my breath. Me neither, Emily admitted. I used to think keeping the peace was the most important thing. But watching you stand up for yourself taught me that truth matters more than comfort. She squeezed my hand. Thank you for that. A year passed. Then 2. Chapter and verse thrived. I bought the building when the owner decided to sell. Diane retired but still came in weekly to volunteer. Father Thomas continued to be a regular customer. Sophia grew into a curious toddler who loved the bookstore. Emily brought her every week, and Sophia would toddle straight to the children's section, pulling books off shelves with determined enthusiasm. One afternoon, as I was processing new inventory, the bell above the door chimed. I looked up to see a young woman, maybe 25, nervously approaching the counter. "Are you Claire Bennett?" she asked. "I am. Can I help you?" "My name is Annie. I'm Diane's granddaughter. She told me about this place, about what you did, standing up to your mother, claiming what was yours." She hesitated. "I'm in a similar situation with my family. Diane thought maybe you could talk to me." I smiled and gestured to the cafe. "Let me make us some coffee." As I prepared the drinks, I glanced around the bookstore, at the customers browsing peacefully, at my father's letter on the wall, at the framed baptism certificate beside it that read Godmother, Claire Bennett. Through the window, I could see the church bell tower, where my father's plaque hung for everyone to see. Disappointment, I whispered to myself, remembering my mother's words that day in the church, looks pretty good in ink. I carried the coffees to where Annie waited, ready to share my story, ready to help someone else find their strength. Just as my father had helped me find mine.